Little Sister is the 21st episode of the 4th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And in general, it's a good episode. There are quite a few good moments. It starts off with Dreyfuss the dog walking up to Dorothy, who's napping on the couch, and he's absolutely beautiful. And we then find out that Rose's sister is visiting, and we learn that Rose hates her sister. And for Rose Nylund to hate somebody, that's quite a big deal. And her sister arrives, her sister Holly, played by Inga Swenson, and we'll come back to Holly in a little bit. We then find out that Sophia has kind of lost track of Dreyfuss, and he is missing, which is not great. She confides in Blanche, but they're not allowed to tell Dorothy because Dorothy thinks that Sophia was not responsible enough to be dog-sitting for Dreyfuss, so they have to try and resolve this, but without Dorothy finding out. A character called Gary then comes in. This is Blanche's date. He's played by Hardin, and there are quite a few things happening with this episode, but everything comes together really nicely. There's one scene in particular where everything ties together really well, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It was a little bit strange as Gary started to hit on Rose, and he said that she was more beautiful than any woman he'd come into contact with, to which Rose replies, "Are most of the women you come in contact with dead?" Which I rather liked. That scene, though, where he was hitting on Rose was so pointless. It just didn't do anything. I guess it was trying to show us that Gary is a bit of a creep because he's dating Blanche and hitting on Rose, but it was so unnecessary. And I'll explain why in a little bit. Holly then keeps making plans with Dorothy and Blanche, but she keeps accidentally leaving Rose out. And it's very clear that while in her first scene she seemed quite likeable, it is very clear that actually she's maybe not a very good person. Certainly not with the way she treats Rose. Dreyfuss has then returned, and Sophia decided to go to the pet store to get a dog that looks like Dreyfuss, but Blanche had found Dreyfuss, and now there are two Dreyfusses. And the pet shop is closed now until Monday. Also, this is a very, very big dog, and I just hate the idea of this giant dog being caged up in the pet store. That's not great. But they now have two Dreyfusses. They do look very, very similar, and Sophia decides to put them both in her bedroom until Monday, so Dorothy won't see. But unfortunately, now she doesn't know which Dreyfuss is Dreyfuss, which is a bit unbelievable because what are the odds of them having identical collars, having identical leashes? It didn't make a lot of sense. I don't think it was very well thought through, but there are two dogs, so I'm happy nevertheless. And then this is the bit where I feel like the earlier scene with Rose doesn't really make a lot of sense because Rose then catches Gary with Holly. Gary, not a nice person. Holly, clearly not either, because she's now stealing Blanche's date, and that obviously makes her look bad, but we just didn't need that scene with Rose earlier on. Yes, it does establish Gary as a bit of a creep, but we didn't need that because we can see with him making out with Holly that that's the case anyway, so that felt a little bit poorly done as well. But now Rose obviously has to decide what to do, and she has a talk with Sophia, and Sophia basically helps her determine that nobody's going to believe her anyway. Because Dorothy and Blanche do not believe that Holly is a bad person. They think Rose is just saying this for whatever reason. So if Rose tells them about Holly and Gary, they're not going to believe her. So they might as well just find out in their own time. And I don't know if I fully agree with that either. So I don't agree with a lot of this episode. But then Rose needs to help Sophia. And she has to help her find out which Dreyfuss is the right Dreyfuss, and she does this by calling Dreyfuss's name, and the dog comes up to her, and it's very, very sweet. The dogs are absolutely adorable. They're so cute. And then we come towards the end, and, well, Holly is busy. She has company, and we find this out because Dreyfuss comes from the bedroom with a pair of trousers in his mouth. And Dorothy and Blanche realise Holly must have male company. Also, staying with your sister and bringing a random man back to the house also doesn't seem like a very good thing for somebody to be doing. But nevertheless, this is what Holly seems to have done until Gary comes out of the room without his trousers and they realise what has happened. Rose confronts Holly, which I thought was great. And there's one quote that I really liked here where Holly was saying that, you know, she was jealous of Rose in a lot of ways and that I never learned how to make friends. To which Rose responded, you never learned how to keep friends, which I think is really great. I think that that's a really significant thing to say, that actually you can make friends. It's not just because you're shy or awkward around people. You can make friends. You're just a bad friend and you can't keep those friends because you only ever think about yourself. And I think there's some really great food for thought there. I think that's a really, really great takeaway. And everything ends with everybody happy. Well, maybe. Sophia goes to take Dreyfuss back home and he doesn't respond to his name. Is this the right Dreyfuss after all or not? Well, who knows? But either way, the dog is absolutely adorable, and Rose ended up being happy in the end. So it's a pretty good episode. I don't agree with certain things. I don't think we needed that scene with Rose and Gary. I don't necessarily agree with the message that they won't believe Rose, so she shouldn't tell them. That's not to say it's 100% her business, but then also it kind of is because it's her sister. I think maybe she should have confronted her sister and told her sister to confess to Blanche. So it's unusual for me to not agree with some of the advice in an episode of The Golden Girls, but with this one, there were definitely a few things that just weren't very well done, weren't well thought out, definitely isn't a perfect episode, but nevertheless, I enjoyed it. The dogs are cute, Rose was great. Ultimately, while it's definitely not a favourite, I'd say that Little Sister is still a good episode of The Golden Girls.